Hi, and welcome to Cooking 100-Year-Old Recipes. I'm Stephanie, and in this video I'm going to cover the history of coffee in America. I'm very excited to do this video because despite how much I adore cooking, coffee is my favorite thing in the whole world. Let's talk about the history of coffee in America. Coffee has a long and fascinating history, and its origins can be traced back to the 9th century in Ethiopia. Let's move ahead to this encapsulated time period of the era I want to cover. We will start with a name familiar to nearly every American, that of James Folger. After deciding against heading to the gold-filled streams in the Sierras in 1860 and participating in California's gold rush, he makes his own golden fortune by founding the J.A. Folger Coffee Company. He's a pioneer in West Coast coffee and helps create the California caffeine rush to keep those prospectors digging and those other hungover newcomers building the great state that it was soon to become. I can't talk about Folgers without talking about Joel Cheek. Competition came in for Folgers about 30 years later. In 1890, Joel Cheek and his cousin began their professional lives as wholesalers. Their grocery business segued into the coffee business. They established the Nashville Coffee and Manufacturing Company, which sold prepared coffee when most companies merely sold the raw green coffee beans. Joel Cheek was one of the only people selling roasted coffee. He believed his product was better quality than the other options out there. He made sure that coffee got to the customer within a week of it being roasted. That way it was always fresh and delicious. One of his big first customers was the Maxwell House Hotel. The hotel bought some of his coffee to serve in their dining room. Supposedly, the customers loved it so much they demanded that the hotel keep selling it. Joel named his coffee brand Maxwell House after the hotel in Nashville where this happened. The Maxwell House was once the center for political and social life in Nashville. Completed in 1869, the luxury hotel had 5 stories, 240 rooms, and it cost $500,000 to complete. Corinthian columns lined the main entrance on 4th Avenue. This notorious part of the men's quarter was not considered proper for a lady to enter, so women had to use a separate entrance. Local lore says that Theodore Roosevelt once stayed at the Maxwell House and commented that the coffee was good to the last drop, thus creating the slogan for Maxwell House Coffee, the nation's first blended coffee. Maxwell House Coffee eventually captured 1/3 of the American coffee market. In the 1890s, coffee was primarily sourced from countries in South America, particularly Brazil and Colombia. These regions had the ideal climate and soil conditions for growing coffee beans, making them the largest producers at that time. Brazil in particular played a significant role in the coffee industry during the 1890s. The country's vast plantations and favorable climate allowed for the mass production of coffee beans. Brazil's coffee production was so substantial that it often influenced global coffee prices. Colombia, on the other hand, was known for producing high-quality Arabica coffee beans. The country's mountainous terrain and rich volcanic soil created the perfect conditions for growing coffee. Colombian coffee was highly sought after for its smooth and rich flavor. John Arbuckle, with the aid of a draftsman and machinist, invented a machine that filled, weighed, sealed, and labeled coffee in paper packages in 1871. From his factory in New York, the Arbuckle Arosa became the first mass-produced coffee sold all over the country. Eventually, Arbuckle became the largest importer of coffee in the world and soon became the largest shipowner in America because every merchant ship engaged in the South American coffee trade was his. Before we make that cup of coffee, we have to actually roast the green coffee beans and turn them into the delicious brown, fragrant beans that we want to grind up and drink. Coffee beans were typically roasted in the home using a cast iron skillet or a specialized coffee roaster, as shown here. The ability to move this away from the heat to discharge the beans is so important because beans get extremely hot, as in they can get to 400 degrees and catch fire. I recall once I did not cool my beans enough after roasting, and they turned to black coal that had a steady stream of smoke coming off them. Now here I'm showing you my green coffee beans. When I compare them to the roasted beans, you can see what a tremendous transformation they undergo during the roasting process. As they let off steam and all of that popping and snapping occurs, they're doubling in size and getting just a bit lighter in weight. Look at the difference between the green bean and the delicious dark roasted bean. You see the edges here of the roaster where the lid rests on it. This would have had lots of steam, then smoke coming out of it. You see, initially when you roast green beans, there's moisture inside of them, and as they begin to wake up, they make a crack around 2 to 3 minutes. Then as the medium and deep roast stages develop, the smoke begins to pour out as it not only releases the remaining moisture, but with it contains carbon dioxide and caffeine. Roasters often speak of the caffeine highs they get from inhaling roasting beans during their shifts at coffee roasting plants. Once the beans were ground using this type of manual grinder, which did require some effort and patience, the ground coffee was placed into a coffee pot or percolator and boiling water was poured over it. The pot was then placed on a stove or over an open flame to brew the coffee. Percolation was a popular brewing method during this time. Now the French press, which we still use today, and it is quite popular, called the plunger method, that was invented in 1890 and would have been used at this time. A third way would be to make boiled coffee. My father used this until the day he died and can still be used today if for some reason your coffee maker breaks. The grounds are placed into a pot, water is added, and then it's brought to a boil. Once the heat reaches the desired temperature, turn off the heat and allow the grounds to settle. Now my father, being Swedish, he threw an eggshell in there to make an extra clear cup of coffee. When the coffee is poured, all of the sediment and grounds should stay at the bottom if the coffee is dispensed very gently as to not agitate what's on the bottom of the pot. During the Gilded Age in America, coffee was served in various ways that reflected the opulence and grandeur of the era. One popular method of serving coffee was in ornate silver or porcelain coffee pots. These pots were often intricately designed and adorned with elaborate handles and spouts, adding a touch of elegance to the coffee service. Coffee was typically served in fine china or porcelain cups and saucers, which were often decorated with intricate patterns or gold accents. These delicate cups added a sense of refinement to the coffee drinking experience. In addition to the traditional cups and saucers, coffee was also served in individual silver or porcelain demi-tasse cups. These smaller cups were used for serving strong, concentrated coffee, often that we think of as espresso today, and they were accompanied by a small spoon and a single sugar cube. On this channel I have videos where I cover menus from Victorian era Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, all which feature coffee, as it is considered that drinking coffee immediately after dinner will likely stimulate and enhance digestion, which was important during heavy celebratory type of meals. Overall, coffee service in the Gilded Age America was a lavish affair with attention to detail and the focus on elegance. From the ornate coffee pots to the deluxe cups and saucers, every aspect of the coffee service was designed to create a sense of luxury and indulgence. Decaffeinated coffee was first invented in 1903 when a German coffee importer, Ludwig Vesalius, turned a batch of ruined coffee beans over to researchers. Although not the first to remove caffeine, they perfected the process of removing caffeine from the beans without destroying any flavor. He marketed the coffee under the brand name Sanka, a contraction of Sans Coffee. Sanka was eventually introduced into the United States in 1923. You may be wondering, Stephanie, how do you prefer to make your coffee? Well, as you see, I roast my own beans and I measure out the appropriate amount and I grind them just before I brew the cup. I use a gooseneck kettle and a pour-over method, which gently saturates the beans, and they are filtered through into a glass pot, and the one I use is called a Chemex. This evenly saturates the beans to extract every drop of flavor that I spent so much time roasting into those beans. And to me, it makes the most perfect cup of coffee. Tell me in the comments, how do you like to have your coffee? How do you make it? Or do you buy it already made in a coffee shop? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again. Please click subscribe, and I will be back with another video as soon as I can.